The abolitionists of the 1700s and the 1800s were entirely right. They may have gone without any possessions in their travels. They were attacked and censored by the mainstream press and in the majority of the public, facing all popular opinion. They started their own independent newspapers and held meetings all throughout the country. They took time away from their day-to-day life to do a higher work of purpose for all mankind. They didn't just end at stopping chattel slavery, they also wanted equality among sexes. They wanted moral labor practices. They experimented with towns created only under the government of God. They used morality as the prime motive cause behind the end to all suffering. And in the end, their moral cause was victorious, but it still continues to this day. They didn't want war. They wanted to show no signs of violence. They did not want the government to mess with the moral affairs of humanity. They shared sympathy for that of the whole world, not just their own country. They didn't participate in any politics or anything connected to that of the government, of which has created and maintained slavery. They ultimately led the charge for the end of chattel slavery, which would have never happened as a thought of possibility if it weren't for their extensive and tiring educative moral cause. Slaves started to rise up against their self-presumed masters. Many abolitionists didn't know how they felt about this. Most were against all forms of aggression, including self-defense, but their opinions soon changed as they realized how necessary self-defense was, how brave it was for slaves to free themselves from their immoral slavery. It was tough to witness, as abolitionists thought it may create a negative opinion of the slaves as being chaotic and immoral themselves. It would then reflect upon the opinion of abolitionists who cherished the cause to end slavery. Abolitionists like Lysander Spooner always held self-defense as essential and realized that the government would soon make matters worse based on all this, since it is by nature a monopoly on violence which ever created slavery to begin with. The abolitionists of the past prove it in their own words that they knew the dangers of government and its inherent danger to a moral society. What occurred was that the government wanted to be seen as that hero which the people will continue their slavish debt toward. It wanted to take over the moral cause and act as the victor for the end of chattel slavery. Violence to end violence. Lysander Spooner would note that this end to chattel slavery was simply a front for the other forms of slavery that government inherently maintains. A war was created that few people wanted. A moral cause of changing minds to free slaves soon changed to a violent cause of forcibly changing minds to free slaves. Being that the result was the goal, today we still ignore the means of how we obtained it. With less focus on education and morality, which is what sparked the whole idea of abolitionism to begin with, this core to abolitionism soon tired out as the American Civil War continued and ended. Since then, the intention in abolitionism has been mostly forgotten by the public. All they see is the end of chattel slavery and nothing more, reflecting good on the government, often disregarding the countless death in the process, the introduction of taxation thereafter, and other forms of modern slavery, despite the words and actions of former abolitionists telling us to look more. Confusion and self-defense was inevitable in the cause of abolitionism, but the government had no right to mess with the affairs of a moral humankind and even pay reparation to slave owners to free their slaves. Slavery would then still exist because the morality was not fully recognized and embraced. The basic idea that violence is wrong, that involuntary interaction is wrong. Government took the moral idea and applied it to legality, which no longer makes it a moral cause, it makes it a legal cause. Chattel slavery would end because it would be made illegal. However, legality created by human self-presumed authority is not morality, and it is always backed by violence or the claim of ownership over the life or property of another, dictating what should be done thereof. And who would pay for those reparations? Indeed, most of all, slavery would still exist because it is the government itself. Slavery or violence will always exist, but it cannot be an established institution, an aggregation, if not for the very existence in government. If you make the case that chattel slavery would have not ended without government, then ask yourself what use the abolitionists were to the cause, and ask yourself how governments have been funded, created, and maintained throughout history since their beginning. The first form of government was the first form of slavery, and every argument made against the abolitionism of one can exactly be made against the other. It is time to understand what work still needs to be done with your help to end slavery once and for all.